And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us, Congressman Mark Pocan for the hour. He's a member of the House Progressive Caucus, represents brilliantly and ably the 2nd District of Wisconsin, Democrat from Wisconsin. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Mark Pocan or at Rep Mark Pocan. It's M-A-R-K. Pocan is P-O-C-A-N. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks, Thom. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you with us. The way that we're going to do this is sort of like the way that we used to do Brunch with Bernie is you and I will talk for 6, 8, 10 minutes. We'll hit a break, and then after the break for the rest of the hour, we'll just take callers, and you can answer questions, and I'll stay out of the way. Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely. Love to.
Cool. So what's happening right now? What's on your mind? What's at the top of your list? What are the things that you'd like to rant about?
I think the thing that I get asked the most, both here in Washington and back home, is just what are the next steps? I think everyone's out of the shock and the grief, and now hopefully most everyone's in the action stage. And, I think what we've been talking about as progressives is, part of it is fighting the good fight. I mean, Donald Trump was going to drain the swamp, and instead he's brought in a whole new, level of, swamp creatures. We've got billionaires and multimillionaires and Wall Street royalty, and this is the cabinet he's put together, so he hasn't exactly done what he promised. But we're going to fight those bad things that are going to happen. But I think equally importantly is we're going to put positive alternatives out there. We're going to let the public know that there is an alternative to what Donald Trump's offering, that he's not going to be able to do what he promised during the campaign, try to stop anything bad that he might try to put forward, but then really offer clear contrasts from infrastructure packages to alternatives for working families, to health care and everything else, offer that stark contrast.
So essentially it's like, I think it's in the UK where they do this. Maybe I'm wrong, but you're creating kind of a shadow government. You're saying this is how we would do it if we were in charge?
Absolutely, and let people know that there are alternatives, that when he promised a big infrastructure package. What we're seeing out of it so far looks like it'll just be a few giveaways to big corporations.
Right.
And instead, we can put together what you really need to do. You got to rebuild our roads and bridges. You got to invest in our schools. And quite honestly, you got to expand broadband into rural areas so people have high-speed access, because without that, that's like water or electricity these days, and too many people don't have it. We got to talk about all those things and then really show that the contrast, what he promised is not what he's delivering, but there is a better vision.
Right. And one of the things he promised was that he was going to slap a tariff on the goods manufactured overseas by companies based in America because they moved their factories overseas. Carrier, case in point. And apparently, even though the media is fawning all over him and saying, victory, victory, yes, he saved 1,000 jobs, maybe it's 800 in Indiana, that's not quite how it's being done, is it?
No, he's offering a bunch of tax incentives and breaks, and I don't know if that's the message we want to send. Is now every company that wants to pay less in taxes is just going to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm about to offshore." Oh, but wait, now you'll offer me a break so that Donald Trump can claim he's saving jobs. I mean, all we've done is teach a new level of bad behavior to corporations that are more than willing to apply bad behavior to save on taxes.
Yeah, this is it's pretty amazing. What is going on in the House right now? You just had a House leadership fight, I guess, or vote anyway yesterday. What are your thoughts on the state of House of Democratic Party, the leadership? Frankly, I know Tim Ryan, but I'm also a big fan. I don't know Nancy Pelosi, but I'm a big fan of hers, and I supported her, but it would have been tough. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, she won overwhelmingly. It was 2-1. I think that probably the discussion on the inside that's probably not particularly relevant to the outcomes of what we're going to do legislatively, because I think they wouldn't have changed that much, is just that there are a lot of folks. My class was 51 people. The next class was 17. This class is 27. There's a lot of us that are relatively new here. Who are trying to be active and want to take on more roles, and I think we're just trying to make sure that we've got that capacity to do that. And I think that message was probably sent, but Leader Pelosi has been a strong progressive leader, and there are plenty of people who don't want her to do things as progressively, and I do want her to. So I'm glad that she's been reelected.
Do you think that the opposition to her was coming from from folks who look down their nose at progressives, basically?
I think a lot of the votes were people that think that, why we lost was because of the progressive agenda, when, if anything, I'd argue just the opposite. We weren't clear enough in what our progressive agenda was.
Right.
When you've got a president advocating for the TPP and, my hometown of Kenosha, Wisconsin, where people used to make autos, 14,000 people out of 70,000 back in the day. Now no one does, and you have $10 and $14 an hour jobs instead, and they were making $20, $25 decades ago. I understand. They were angry because they think no party had their back for the last 3 decades, and they looked at Trump as an outsider. And 13 points spread is what Obama won by 4 years ago. This time Trump won by 1. I understand that, and I think that's the message I'm hoping that we get out of when we've been back for a couple of weeks is we weren't clear enough on our opposition to bad trade deals, and we weren't clear enough on how we were going to fight for working families. And if we had done that more distinctly, we never should have lost that voter. I hate this monolith of that white rural male voter we lost. Now, that's about 5 different voters that make that up.
Sure.
And some of them we never had. People who are xenophobic and racist are probably never going to be Democrats anyway. But the folks that were there on economic terms that have been hurting because of how the economy has changed, and they think no one's had their back.
Right, the black working class, the Latino working class.
Absolutely. We didn't sufficiently deliver the message that we were going to have their backs, and I think hopefully we've learned that lesson.
Right. I mean, this is why Trump took more of those voters than Romney did, which is
absolutely
just bizarre when you think about it.
In Wisconsin, 27,000 votes. I can tell you, in my hometown, when it flipped 14 points, and a lot of other parts of Wisconsin were like that. That was the leading message.
Wow. Remarkable. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. He'll be taking your calls. Have questions about how Congress works, about specific legislation, about his ideas, his thoughts on his policies, prescriptions, what we can expect in the Congress. Give us a call, 202-808-9925. We'll be right back with your calls for Congressman Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan right after this. And welcome back. Joanne, in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, you are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan. What's on your mind today?
Well, there's several problems that we're facing today. And one of these things about the companies that keep them from going elsewhere, why don't we say just go? Take over the companies, take over the products, or build our own corporations for the people, by the people, and stop this foolishness. Stop getting pressured by these big money companies. If they build it, we can build it. This is crazy.
Congressman Pocan?
Sure. I think the thing that we need to do right now more than anything is just make sure that we stop these loopholes in ways that they try to not pay taxes and not be good corporate citizens in the U.S. because they're going to keep their headquarters here. They have a lot of employees, people who are working here in the United States. But what they're trying to do is when they either try to do something like, buy an Irish company so they can claim that they're not a U.S. company anymore through a tax inversion. We need to stop those kind of practices, and we need to go after when they hide their profits overseas and then wait until we give them another holiday to bring it in. We need to go after that money as it's leaving. Catch that money up front so it doesn't have a chance to leave the area. We need them just to follow their rules because, I've had a small business, Thom, for 29 years, and I know you had a small business, and I think the vast...
Well, we still have one. It's this radio show.
Absolutely. And the vast, vast majority of people who have small businesses are honest and pay their taxes. It's the people who try to get around it, the bigger corporations that are always trying to scam the rules with lots of lawyers and accountants, that we have to really make sure that they're better corporate citizens. So while I certainly understand the angst of the call, I think what we did need to go, and hopefully this is something that we can try to see if we can make Donald Trump live up to the words he promised in the campaign, which is do something about those companies that are trying not to play by the rules that the rest of us do.
Yeah, Joanne, is that? Did your question get answered?
Well, in the future, make sure there's strings attached. Like when we bailed out the banks, no strings attached to refinance the homes. Don't put the people out. Don't let the houses sit there and rot. Returning the money where the money is spent. Specific rules on when you give money out. Just giving them the money and say, yes, we promise we're going to do that, that's not taking care of the American people. That's not why we put them there. And the American people need to remember to vote. And if they don't vote, it's their problem. But when you vote for someone, keep their feet to the fire. If they say they're going to help you, work for you, then you have to keep their feet to the. Well, I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of it.
Joanne, it sounds like you're sort of echoing the congressman. Congressman, we got to have just a minute to the break. Your thoughts on Joanne's thoughts on your thoughts.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. And the only thing I'd add, Joanne, is when you talk to an elected official, if while you're saying something to them, they're nodding their head, that doesn't mean they agree with you. That means they have the muscles in the back of their neck that allow their head to bob. You have to get a yes or a no answer out of people and hold them accountable, because generally, if they don't give you a yes or no, the answer is no.
So what do we do about our trade policy?
I'll tell you, we have to have a trade policy that represents the labor and environmental and other consumer standards that we expect in this country. And I think now moving forward, that's one of the things we have to do as President-elect Trump puts out his proposals. We want trade policies that actually represent fair trade, not just so-called free trade.
Right. Maybe a national trade policy like we had before Reagan, rather than all these multi and bilateral trade deals?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we need to have actual standards that have been diminishing with each and every trade deal from NAFTA on.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, representing Wisconsin's 2nd District. We'll be back with your opportunity to talk to a member of the House of Representatives and, lobby your cause, ask your question, as whatever it may be. Stick around. We'll be right back. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls for the hour. And Congressman Johnny in Lamarck, Texas, is on the line with us. Johnny, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, Congressman Johnny to Congressman Pocan. How you doing?
Hey, very good, Johnny. How are you?
Are you guys aware? I know Thom probably is, but Mr. Pocan, are you aware of the existence of an interpretive guide to parliamentary procedure contained within the rules of the House of Representatives, known as the Jefferson's Manual, and a step-by-step guide within that that's called a memorial for impeachment that outlays a procedure for private citizens to initiate impeachment procedures against any federal official up to and including the office of president? And also, is there any serious talk about getting impeachment procedures started against that Dakota governor?
So, Johnny, first of all, when it comes to North Dakota, one of the things I think we're trying to just see happening out of Congress more now is just in response to what's happening to the protesters. I think it's been unconscionable what the governor has allowed to happen in North Dakota. And you're starting to see more and more statements. We put one out as the Progressive Caucus, and personally, and other members have. Representative Raul Grijalva and Jared Huffman have done a letter as well. We're all urging the president to try to take actions on this. I'm not aware of any impeachment procedures in North Dakota, recognizing the fact that, especially on the legislature, while there is still a little bit of a populist streak to some folks in North Dakota. It used to be part of a group we had of Midwest Progressive Elected Official Network. They were in with Wisconsin when I was in the state legislature, although, Thom, ironically, our acronym was MPON, probably the worst acronym ever for an organization. But there aren't a lot of folks that I know in North Dakota still in the legislature that might do that. But clearly we need to do something, and the president needs to, I think, take some action to do something to protect the protesters who are exercising their rights. Johnny, I don't know about the citizens' efforts or initiatives to do that if they have that possibility in North Dakota. But what we can do right now is make sure that those protesters are protected and that, from water cannons in winter, I mean, for anyone who's not from a winter weather area, that's extremely inhumane, to the hand grenades, everything else that they've been using, the combustion ones.
Is there any effort in Congress to do anything about this?
Well, there have been, so Progressive Caucus did something, a couple members did something. We're seeing some individual efforts right now also. Right. But
with the Republicans in charge, there's no law going to be changed to stop, Dakota or the Army Corps of Engineers from what appear to be brutal tactics that they're taking.
Exactly. And so I think what we're hoping is, this is one of those things that Barack Obama could potentially do between now and January 20th. And I think that's where most of our hopes are pinned.
Right. And to Johnny's question about Jefferson's Manual, I've read reference to it over the years. I don't know much about it. Do you?
No, I don't. I don't know much.
Okay. All right. Melissa in Seattle, Washington, listening on Progressive Voices. Melissa, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. I was wondering, at the top of your discussion, Senator Pocan, you indicated that you wanted to get the message out that the Democratic Party is for the people, that we want to support getting jobs back, and so on and so forth. I'd like to know how you're going to get that message out. If Hillary Clinton couldn't get her reasonable messages out to the public during her 2 years of campaigning, how are we ever going to get any messages out with the current corporate media?
Yeah, this is a rant, if I can add to that, Melissa, and Congressman, that I went off on in the last hour, and that is that back in the 80s, Lee Atwater, we used to actually have reporting in this country. It was like, I remember in 72, the example I used, when Richard Nixon proposed what we today call Obamacare. And it was virtually a clone, And Ted Kennedy opposed it because it wasn't single payer, it wasn't perfect, and he shot it down. But John Chancellor did this report, as I recall, or maybe it was Walter Cronkite on CBS, where they literally put up on the screen, here's Nixon's program, here is Ted Kennedy's program, here are the differences between the two, here's what it's going to cost, all this kind of stuff. We used to know about issues. But then, between Brent Bozell and what's his name, they got together and they said, let's work the refs. Let's start screaming every time the press talks about policy, because when people learn what Republican policies actually are, they start hating Republicans. And so they so whipped, they so trashed, they so terrified the media back in the 80s that literally since the 80s, there's been no consequential discussion, and particularly in this day and age, of actual issues, which, Bernie and other members of Congress who are considered yourself members are, are concerned about issues, go on TV and try to talk about the issues. And instead they're like, well, how do you feel? And who do you think is going to win? And is he really crazy or not? And all these kind of stupid questions that have nothing to do with the actual issues. So, her question is really spot on. How do you get through that media filter that is terrified to talk about issues because they're afraid that they're going to get harassed by the right wing?
Well, part of it is I think we have to more and more think outside the box, right? I mean, I think Bernie's campaign was something that was a little outside the traditional box of presidential campaigns. And look how well he did by building it from the grassroots up. Let's face it, the people are generally with us on the issues. We just have to be able to get the message out. But maybe that means we have to use more alternative methods. With social media, with that ability, we can get things out in other ways. So I think we just can't just think, are we going to be put on the Sunday morning shows? No, because 20 people are on the Sunday shows. Maybe 40 people are covered by the networks at news, if even that many. But there's plenty of other ways, I think, through people we can get those messages out. And I think, again, Bernie's campaign was a good example. How to build on that, I would argue, Thom, is, someone like Keith Ellison, who's running for the DNC chair. If you take someone who comes from that people's movement of what built Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, but happens to be from inside the Democratic Party and can take that institution and instead of worrying about raising money from pharmaceutical companies and others to try to compete dollar for, half dollar that they have on the Republican side, to try to raise that kind of money, let's do it just like Bernie. You can raise it from the people, because if we are clear about what we stand for and what another vision could be, I think you're going to find people wanting that alternative and contrast. So, I think there's a lot of ways, but we got to think outside the box. If we think it's just going to the corporate media or just, going to some of the cable networks and thinking that and that alone is enough, of course we're going to lose. So I just think we got to kind of keep getting ahead of where the Republicans will try to stop those messages from getting out. But we have really good messages. We know that. And we just have to make sure that we're spreading that person to person through a grassroots effort.
Yeah, it's the problem. I mean, I used to make the joke that, the Sunday morning show, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Republicans.
Yes.
And it's when it was the Bush administration, why do you have 60-70% Republicans on? Oh, because they're in power. Then when it was the Obama administration, somebody asked meet the press, why do you have 60-70% Republicans on? Oh, because they're out of power, so they should be heard. Come on, give me a break. But you're right. I mean, Donald Trump has proven how powerful Twitter can be. Okay, we're hitting our break at the bottom of the hour. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls here on the Thom Hartmann program. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N, at Mark Pocan, or at Rep Mark Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Stick around. We'll be right back. Coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us, Congressman Mark Pocan, representing the state of Wisconsin, a member of the House Progressive Caucus, one of the good guys in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Democrat from Wisconsin. Pocan, Pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Mark Pocan or at Rep Mark Pocan. It's M-A-R-K, P-O-C-A-N. Congressman, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. And let's see here. Thom in Waupaca, Wisconsin. Am I saying that right, Thom?
Very close, Tom. Waupaca, Wisconsin.
Great. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello to my friend Mark. It's a communication theme today, I think, and I think Tom's right on. But there are some old school communications that the Dems are still not doing in this state. I live in a red area. Weekly newspapers are still strong. AM radio, agriculture radio, and none of that's being touched by the Democrats. And I think, and Thom, you can attest to this, Al Gore had it sort of right to start. You got to build your own communications network. The Democrats need to replicate the bottom up, the morning through the afternoon, evening, just like they've done on the other side. Until that's done, we have a dual society, and the others will never intertwine until we can break through that.
Yeah, interesting thoughts. Congressman?
Well, see, that's good Wisconsin common sense, Tom. Right there, you're hearing.
There you go.
And I agree with you, Tom. I mean, that is what we need to do. We can't just rely on those big networks. And let's face it, to some degree, with cable, they're getting less of a viewership and a listenership anyway. So we need to make sure that we access every single place we can to get the information out. We've had our issues in Wisconsin. There's been no question. We've got a really important election coming up in 2018. Tammy Baldwin will be up for re-election, a strong progressive U.S. senator, and we have a chance to take out Scott Walker and have a Democratic governor. So we need to definitely take advantage of every way to get our messages out. Again, on every poll and every focus group I've seen, the public agrees with us on our issues, but if we don't say them clear enough. I mean, earlier, I think when I believe it was Melissa was talking, or maybe it was Joanne, the one argument I would say about Hillary Clinton is, Hillary Clinton talked and sounded like a lawyer. When she talked about the TPP, her answer was, I don't support the Trans-Pacific Partnership as currently written. Now, I think I know what she meant. She didn't support the provisions that are currently in there. But when you say that, that sounds wiggly. It doesn't sound very strong. It doesn't sound like I'm trying to protect your job and I'm going to make sure your job doesn't go overseas. We have to be crystal clear in those values and then get out in every possible way and talk about them.
Yeah, and not to turn this into a Hillary bashing thing either, because she was very clear about a lot of values, and so much of the platform was very progressive, and she was very explicit about it. And yeah, you're right. On occasion she kind of lapsed into lawyer speak, but even that didn't, to a large extent, didn't cut through in the media. I mean, it's really, really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Judy in Bailey, Colorado, and I know you supported Hillary Clinton running up to the election, after the primary. Judy in Bailey, Colorado. Judy, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hi, Representative Pocan. First, the internet doesn't get out to the masses. You have to know the websites to go to, and you got to want to go to those websites. Now, the reason I really called was, why is it that these corporations who are getting government contracts are allowed to make their items overseas and take everything overseas and still have the taxpayer pay for whatever they're paying for?
Great question, Judy.
Yeah, Judy, I'll tell you, that's something I think we have tried to talk about in every way possible. You know, when we benefit companies that send jobs overseas, I hate to say it, but Donald Trump gave very simple answers without maybe a lot of details or explanation of how he's going to do it. But he was pretty clear on that, you know, how he was going to try to stop that. We actually have the policies in place that would do that, you know, if you take when the money is earned, and if at that point it's taxed rather than allowed to go overseas and not be taxed until someone decides to bring it back in, you would be much more clear on how you operate. If you have a company that wants to do an inversion and be an Irish company, I remember we did a press conference with Rosa DeLauro and Jan Schakowsky and Lloyd Doggett and Keith Ellison and others saying, okay, fine, Pfizer, you want to be an Irish company? Then we had a chart showing what they charge for their drugs in Ireland and the United States. Then charge us Irish prices. We need to be far more clear on those things. And one other area is often companies get money for so-called job creation, but there's never a tie-in to that they actually created the jobs, especially at the state level we see this.
Well, I think she's also talking about the Buy America Act that was passed by Congress in '33. In fact, it was the last piece of legislation that Herbert Hoover signed before he left the White House. And it said that if any federal agency is buying anything from a desk to, you know, a typewriter back then, a computer today, they had to source it from an American supplier unless the executive branch provided a waiver. And so, you know, up until the 80s, everything in the Pentagon was made in the United States. Everything in every government office was made in the United States. Reagan started passing out those waivers like they were candy. And every president since has continued that practice. So now you find Chinese-made computers all over the Pentagon. You find furniture made in Vietnam all over government offices. You find all this stuff because the Buy America Act is being, by and large, completely ignored. Why not revive that? Why not push really hard? Why, and to this point, to Donald Trump, to say, you know, hey, you've talked about, you know, America first, at least enforce this damn law, or propose a new version of it that has even stronger teeth.
I feel like you're part of the office because this is one of the conversations I have in my district in Beloit, Wisconsin, Fairbanks Morse, that makes the big engines for ships. And the Coast Guard currently is buying them from overseas rather than buying them from made in the U.S. And you know, that's 500 jobs at a company that in a city that is still economically depressed. I mean, we absolutely should push President-elect Trump to live by that because that does impact real American jobs. And potentially that could be something he may actually follow, but it's certainly a very, very important thing to companies that I have in my district.
Yeah, I think it'd be an amazing thing if they just started enforcing the damn law.
Exactly.
Jimmy in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, nice to talk to you, Congressman. I have a pretty simple question about Medicare.
Yeah.
And that is, why all these years, maybe somebody's had this argument, but why haven't they said that eliminate the 20% copay? It should cover 100%. Most people can't even afford that 20%. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Jimmy, I think that the tough part we have right now is they're going to be doing everything they can to try to essentially destroy, as we know it, Medicare, with the voucherization and the other efforts that they're talking about doing to try to cut it. We're going to be in a defense mode, and realistically, just given where the majority is going to be, I don't see something that says take away the 20% copay that does provide slightly less of a cost, because a lot of people are paying that. I don't see that happening. I think what we have to get ready for, one of the very biggest fights that we're going to have, is doing what we can to protect Medicare. Even though I agree with you, we need to strengthen Medicare, we're going to have to protect it as a first priority, because I think they're going to go after it early. Paul Ryan's already indicated that. Thom Price, who's going to be the new secretary for that area of Health and Human Services, he was the ranking member on the Budget Committee, which I served on. He has constantly, in the Republican version of the budget in the House, put efforts to voucherize Medicare. We know this is something that's a priority, especially for the Republicans in Congress, and we are going to have to do everything we can to, as a grassroots level, fight to protect one of the most popular and important programs that we have, that and Social Security.
And that 20% copay was really drilled into Medicare in order to provide a space for health insurance companies to make a profit. and they're doing very well. The CEO of United Healthcare has taken over $1 billion in compensation, and this is one of their major products is Medicare Advantage and Medicare supplements, just because of that. So it's pretty amazing. It's how when you look at how all this stuff was put together, it's like whenever Republicans are involved, there's a scam in there. There's a way to channel some money to some banksters. In this case, the health insurance banksters. It's incredible.
Yep.
Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. Mark Pocan at Mark Pocan to tweet him. Pocan.house.gov. His website is a plethora of great information. Pocan.house.gov. We'll be right back with more of his answers to your questions.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with your calls for Congressman Pocan. And welcome back. Sarah, watching Free Speech TV in Fort Worth, Texas. Sarah, you are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, Tom. Hey, Congressman Pocan. Thank you so much for taking my call. My question, one of the core things that I think is happening, these I call them monopolies already with these big companies. Is there any possibility that legislation will ever be brought forward to break these companies up? I think it's absolutely crippling our country in every single industry across the board, whether it be medical, media, all of it.
Yeah, it all tracks back to '82 when Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act. Your thoughts, Congressman?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Sarah, you are so on to something. We have had conversations, Mark DeSaulnier from California, Debbie Dingell from Michigan, and I, with the Department of Labor. And originally we started the conversations to kind of figure out this gig economy, the Uber economy, so to speak. That's about 1 million people. Through those conversations, though, we found out that there are at least 30 million people who are independent contractors in this country in just 5 industries, and there's probably 70 million people that could be listed as independent contractors. And what that means is often they have to take out their own taxes, they're not getting benefits, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of things we're seeing, and part of that conversation led us to sitting down with a group called the Roosevelt Institute and other organizations that were looking at this, quite honestly, for Secretary Clinton as she was running. One of the big things we're finding is that a lot of the industries, there's these consolidations where there's, airlines, banks, et cetera. There's just a few big entities. But even more so, there's another step that even when you only have 4 or 5 big entities in an industry, often the board of directors are really overlapping even in those 4 or 5. There's some people that are on multiple board of directors within those industries. So we really have to start looking at that, how you can break up these really large corporations, because in the end, they're not even taking care of shareholders or employees. It becomes just the few people, the stockholders, the people on the board that are making sure how they do compensation is so that they get rich, but absolutely no one else does. And this is something that, again, Roosevelt Institute was starting to work on with Secretary Clinton, but luckily some of us are having conversations with them as well. And one of the answers to some of this that we've been looking at falls right in this category of antitrust.
Congressman, we have just a minute to the break. And there's also all this collusion. I mean, one airline changes prices, all the airlines change prices.
Absolutely. When you have that few industry, that's what's happening.
Yeah. And so I realize the Republicans are not going to do anything about this and they control Congress right now, but Democrats are pushing on this. And is there specific legislation in the pipeline?
I would say we're probably just at the pre-step because there were 3 or 4 major ideas that kind of thread together around dealing with this. And because we've sat down, we had a briefing for members of Congress and their staffs. We're kind of at that stage of it, but I would guess sometime in the first 3 to 6 months, you may have a package of legislation to address this.
To what extent do we need new legislation versus simply reversing the Reagan decision to stop enforcing the Sherman Act? I mean, it's still on the books.
Part of it may be since we're not going to see it happen with the current, the makeup of the next Congress and executive branch, we're going to probably propose legislation to try to bring out the highlight that way.
Yeah, or force it on the executive branch, essentially. Yeah, brilliant. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Mark Pocan on the line taking your calls. And Carol in Yucaipa, California. Am I saying that right, Carol? Probably not.
Yucaipa. I'm in San Bernardino County.
Okay, great. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. What's up?
Hi, Congressman. What I wanted to bring up is what's going to happen. How is Congress going to handle it when the vets go to Standing Rock? And the reason I know this is actually happening is because I ran into some vets and started talking to them, and they were telling me then they're going there. They are prepared to shoot and kill.
Yikes.
To protect the rights of the citizens of the United States, which are the people that are protesting.
Yikes, that's pretty serious.
We're headed
stuff.
for a revolution because nobody is standing up for these people.
Congressman, your thoughts?
Well, I think no one is standing up in the governor's office in North Dakota, which is the problem. But I think clearly people across the country are talking out about this. Like I said, this week alone, I've seen multiple members of Congress, including the Progressive Caucus, speaking out on this. I think where the action is probably going to happen is from the president. We're going to need something at that level because you can't continue to have this kind of violence against protesters since the governor has been so cavalier about his attitude as these various tactics are being used. Something has to step in, and really something that can step in is the White House. So that's, I think, where our efforts should be in trying to make sure that there's a protection for people who are just trying to do what they're trying to do around the protests.
We had a caller, just FYI, who just got back from there say that, basically everybody in Bismarck watches Fox News, and the only radio stations in the area are right-wing hate radio. There's no progressive radio. And she said that literally just getting off the plane, people in the airport were hostile toward her. The drivers were hostile toward her. Shop owners, if they thought that you were buying something to take out to the protesters, were hostile. It's getting pretty polarized out there, and as you said, the governor's not helping this at all. Just a very bad, ugly situation.
Yeah, the president has to step in. I think that's
this requires serious leadership. Yeah. Justin in Sellersville, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan. How are you doing today?
Very good, Justin. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Just before I come up with something else regarding Sherman Antitrust Act, but you guys answered that. I have a question because I've been talking with a couple people trying to find the best judgment regarding to justify the Fight for 15 movement and that sort of stuff all over. I mean, do we need to just refer them back to the 20s? Or, I mean, that's one question.
Sure. So how do you justify? What's the best argument in favor of the Fight for 15?
I'll tell you, this is the argument I use, Justin. I mean, I'm a small business owner. I've been for 29 years. I have a very small union printing shop. And, I would argue that the absolute single best way to stimulate the economy is when it comes from the bottom up. Rising tide lifts all boats. So if you have more money in the pockets of people who are going to spend that money immediately and not put it in an offshore bank account or save it for the next, trip to the Bermuda or anything else, that money goes directly into the economy. And people buy sofas, and they go to the movies, and they go out to eat, and that helps create jobs, the ripple effect in the economy. But at the current minimum wage, you can't get by on $15,000 a year. So you have one or two or three of those jobs. You likely don't have benefits. And that money's not really getting circulated in the general economy. It covers rent, it covers utilities, but not a whole lot more. So if you really want to stimulate the economy, you really want to get it going, you put that money in the hands of people who are most likely to immediately put it back into the economy and have the ripple effects that it has. And then you have the dignity of a wage really also representing the work that someone's doing. And then they can live really, I think what should be the goal of everyone is the opportunities of the middle class, which are you can, afford a mortgage, send your kids to college, take a family vacation. That's what gets created when you raise that minimum wage. So not only do you address the poverty and equity issues, but you actually help stimulate the economy. And that's why as a small business owner, I've always been a very strong supporter of it.
Yeah, amen. Mike in Niagara Falls, New York, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Mike, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, hi, Congressman. I'm a big supporter of student debt has had bankruptcy and consumer protections uniquely stripped from it over the years. And with 28 million out of the 44 million current and former students in this country currently struggling just to make payments on their student debt, how do you feel about supporting? There's a bill on the House floor right now, H.R. 449, that would restore bankruptcy protections to student loans, both government or both public and private. How do you feel about that? And there's currently about 15 or 16 congressmen and women currently on that bill sponsoring it. How do you feel about helping to co-sponsor that bill?
Yeah, Mike, let me tell you this. First of all, I don't know if I've seen the bill directly, but let me try to address it a little bit indirectly. And first, if I can, take it a little broader. Student debt is now the number one consumer debt that we have out there. It's quadrupled in the last 11 years. You now leave the University of Wisconsin, a great public world-class institution with $30,000 in debt with a 4-year degree. Go to a private school, it's going to be even more and more. We have to deal with not just the student debt, and I actually put the very first bill out ever in Congress in 2013 to allow you to refinance at the lowest available rate possible, people with those high-interest loans. But you also have to address the college affordability up front, and we've been working on a bill with Keith Ellison around trying to make sure you can have college without debt, that you could go to a 4-year program and leave with absolutely no debt. So this bill specifically, I will take a look at it, Mike. The only thing is I wouldn't say it's not on the floor. On the floor generally means we're going to be voting on it. It's probably a bill that's introduced. But, those were protections that are in place for banks, not for real people. And, at the rates when you're paying 6.6% interest on a student loan, it's not as if you need those protections anymore.
Well, and we had this before 2005 when the bankruptcy bill that Joe Biden was pushing so hard was going through Congress. I had Senator Debbie Stabenow on the program supporting the bankruptcy bill. And I said, but this thing, is going to eliminate the ability of people with student loans to declare bankruptcy on their student loans. And that's going to hurt a lot of young people who may not even realize what they're getting into, the kind of bondage they're getting into. And her response was to the effect of, well, it's time for them to grow up and learn some responsibility. And that seemed to me like a very weak answer. It really seems like we need to reverse at least that egregious part of the bankruptcy bill of 2005, because that's why these things are being sliced and diced by the banks.
It tips the balance of the banks. And I'll tell you, my concern that you're going to see, I think, in the next session is a lot of Republicans on the Education and Workforce Committee and on the Budget Committee that I serve on, when we've had debates about student aid, think that you should just be able to go to private banks and get that. If we have student financial aid only coming through people who can get the loans from banks, they're going to pay much higher rates. You're going to have no protections that you might have otherwise through the current system. We're going to have those fights to have. There are people who literally the argument from one representative was, if you give people more financial aid, that means more money goes to universities, and that means more money goes to professors. And that was their argument.
And God forbid professors make a living.
Exactly. As insane as that is, that's the people I serve with and have to convince what to do proper in the next 2 years. So we've got to fight around multiple fronts. But, Mike, I will take a look at that bill, and we'll see what we can do. I agree with the sentiment.
Yeah, even Republicans have kids that are loaded up with student debt, especially Republican voters.
Absolutely.
You would think that this is a sales pitch that would...
The difference is, don't forget, the average member of Congress, the majority are millionaires. They're not exactly representative of society in general.
Yeah, and that's a big shift in the last 30 years.
Oh, big shift.
I mean, there used to be one millionaire, I think, in the House of Representatives back, during the Reagan era. And now it's, like you said, it's the majority. It's astonishing.
Yep.
Congressman Mark Pocan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, absolutely, Tom. Anytime. I love doing your program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to have you with us. U.S. Congressman Mark Pocan, pocan.house.gov, at Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K Pocan, or at Rep Mark Pocan. You can tweet him.